These talks are open for discussion. I'm Betsy Mellons, for any of you who I haven't met before. Should we start with any questions from any parents? Yeah, Sabrina.
What are the practical implications for you guys as doctors and researchers of defining SJIA as autoimmune or autoinflammatory? Does it go to how you treat it or other things?
I think that the implications are, my main point is that it's important not to put it into a box until you know that it belongs there. So if you think that it's an autoinflammatory disease, so what an autoinflammatory disease is still a little loosely defined. So I sometimes put the innate versus adaptive immune difference there. We can talk about that, what that means. That's not quite it, as everybody who does research in this area knows. Basically, it's antigen dependent, so a specific target dependent versus specific target independent. That's at least the definition more that I use. If you think that it's independent of a particular target, you won't look. You won't investigate further. Is there a kind of an immune process going on? You won't consider the possibility that maybe the reason that some people get better over time is because their immune systems learn to control it in a way that they cannot control, that you wouldn't think of controlling a disease where you're just missing a brake on your car, like you are with the cryopyronopathies, for example. So I don't know for sure whether you can control it. I'm not sure that there is an immune tolerance break or an immune tolerance recovery later in disease. But if you rush to the conclusion that there can't be such a thing, you will miss it. And so I think that the point here is not to say that it's not an autoinflammatory disease. It's to say that we have to be careful. There are atypical features here, and by this wholesale lumping it, take it out of the JVA category, and which is all autoimmune, which is not so clear either, frankly, and then put it into this separate category all by itself, as though they don't have a relation to each other. That seems premature to me. And my lab works on mechanisms of arthritis, and there are a lot of mechanisms that are shared between, I think, RA and this disease or other forms of JA. So it's less practical implications. It's more like how we think about the disease going forward.
I can just say the same thing with different words. So we have been discussing a lot rather non-specific factors, the cytokines. Because if you get fever from infection, your body will produce the same TNF, the same IL-6. So there is a common pathway. And remember my first slide, so there were hands of patients. The top is sort of the unknown. So when we don't know for sure, we have the tendency to use complex words, and autoimmune is one of those complex words. Meaning that autoimmune simple definition should be that you are self-destroying your body, whatever, right? If you drink too much, it's bad too, right? So then you understand that there is specificities above your age, your sex, your genetic background, where you live. So these are things which, in combination on a kinetic pathway, will induce step by step a long story. So you start with a disease which has been there, you not knowing it's there, and then one day, because you get a bad infection or whatever, then the disease becomes clinical. So in the picture we showed, we saw this morning of sort of acute disease in children, it's easier to find a single explanation because within a few months of life, you get everything combined. In the adult population, to some extent, it's the same thing. But if it were so severe, that would be seen much earlier. But the point of saying autoimmune versus autoimmune is also inflammatory. So at the end, so I'm not so sure it's today. We have enough reasons to sort of we could do that the way we will explain the top part of the slide. Since today we are targeting non-specific factors, we have some disease which has IL-1 and the long list of targets. So it's too early, I think, to sort of say the adult is autoimmune and the juvenile is not.
Lexi.
Peter, just a couple of weeks ago at the press meeting in Genoa, there was a very interesting show coming from the Hers group, showing that actually if you look at the patients with established systemic JIA, look at their fluids and blood, you actually pick up gamma delta cells producing Th17, very consistent with what you just described. My question to you, do you think the relative absence or the relative lack of interferon gamma activity in conventional systemic JIA rather than MS might contribute to the expansion of Th17 population? Because, you know, supposedly Th1 suppresses Th17, right? So if you have an unopposed, and if so, would you advocate for the use of bispecific anti-IL-1, anti-IL-17 antibodies in that stage of SJIA?
So that's a very sophisticated question, to which I do not have a very sophisticated answer. I think that it hasn't. I think that the evidence. So I think that the mouse model that we presented has a lot to teach us in that context, and I actually don't know what's been done on IL-17 and interferon gamma in that model. IL-17 does work. It's not perfect. It's not only gamma delta T cells. So CD4 T cells that are not gamma delta also are critical in that model independently. So are they producers of all the cytokines? I don't know. I don't like. I'm not sold on the bispecific antibody model yet. In terms of I like to be able to tweak one thing separately from another. But yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you,
I can, you want, I can, without saying I will explain again, because there is a key point in the definition of the Th17 cells, which is really misleading. The definition in common life is you take cells, including both cells, you almost kill them with massive activation, and you stain for intracellular IL-17. And if it goes up or it's higher in the disease, you say there is an increase in Th17 contribution or whatever. The point is, I always say it's obvious, if you are inside, you are not outside, right? So for a cytokine to contribute has to go outside. And it makes sense. The circulating cells may be able to be ready to vomit, I would say, the IL-17, but for that, they need to migrate to the site of where either infection for protection or chronicity for the disease we are discussing. There is a need for cell-cell interaction between the migrating lymphocytes that we saw on the first slide and reaching the local situation. And then this deep, it's not just kissing, as I said the other day, is really deep, deep interaction then leads to the massive IL-17 or gamma interferon production. Just the contact of activated cell. So I think difficult to sort of extrapolate from intracellular staining under full stress conditions, in fact, and say this explains why at the local site. The local site can be explained through cell-cell interaction, because if the cells don't touch, they don't do that. So you keep a modest amount of IL-17. If you have the contact, you multiply by 10 the output, and the output is the disease at the end.
Can I bounce Fabrizio's comments back to this group? So a lot of people who treat patients that are hard to treat. Has anyone used secukinumab or ustekinumab in these patients? We have one ustekinumab.
Certainly not systemic JIA, and horrendous, very acute uveitis, and bad psoriatic arthritis. And the psoriasis responded beautifully to very high dose ustekinumab. And the arthritis persisted. But this is a child whose arthritis persisted through everything
Right.
else.
So my comment was more on generating data from a biomarker point of view that allows us to define whether there is a subgroup of patients, maybe the non-responder who are down there. Sometimes they get down there on your slide very quickly. So I think one issue here is trying to understand if there is a subset of patients in which IL-1 plus IL-6 or one or the other induce the Th17.
So
And
there's,
you have done something.
Yeah, just the most preliminary, that when we took circulating, we weren't looking for gamma delta cells, and maybe that would be the next experiment to do. We just took circulating CD4 cells from SJIA and healthy controls, and I don't think we put polyarticular JIA cells. It's a while ago, so I'm not remembering exactly whether we had the poly JIA control. But we saw it when we put the CD4 cells in IL-17 inducing conditions that we got a much greater generation of IL-17 cells in a subset of the SJIA patients compared to the normals. It wasn't all the SJIA patients, and it was just really, it's at this, it's on the list for somebody to pursue in the lab, so it's really just the beginning of trying to see whether there is a subset who may be predisposed. I think one thing that, of course, is key, and it sort of is related to what Pierre said, and that has to do with how plastic all of these cells are and how much they respond to their environment, and particularly, in the arena of Th17 and Tregs, there's a lot of thought about, we know that there's just a cytokine or two difference between driving towards Treg and driving towards Th17. And so that issue of plasticity and the local environment, it seems to me, is quite critical. I do think we all need to look at gamma delta cells more.
But can I just say, well, I do think, though, that the point of, at least the general thesis of my talk was not so much dependent on that it's going to be IL-17, that's going to be the second
No,
the answer,
of course,
right?
but he was asking about IL-17.
No, I understand, it is. But that we should make sure that we realize that these cytokine baths that our patients are bathed in have lots of consequences on immune reprogramming that have the consequences we should consider. And Th17 is one of them. There are probably others, and I don't mean to say that's it, but it's certainly a promising possibility. I know, Scott, you had something too.
Established disease or new disease?
That was all established disease. Yeah, we didn't look at it, that none of the patients had.
I think that's a question, right?
Yeah.
There are two papers that are relevant. Maybe we could talk about them separately, but there are two papers that both find little tiny increments or no increase at all in Th17 circulating. But these are the kids that didn't get invited to the party, right? I mean, they're the blood.
Can I just clarify for Fabrizio, copy and paste, because you mentioned so much the total gamma interferon, the free interferon. The key point, obviously, is that the bound doesn't work. That's why the drug is a drug. And the free is the one which is left and doing the job. So we build an assay just for that to measure bioactive circulating IL-17. Because if you look at papers looking at ELISA IL-17, either you have a drop or a kilo or a pound. So the range is impossible to follow. And we look first at rheumatoid arthritis sample, and we found obviously heterogeneity, but what was clear was the link between having circulating IL-17 and having a bad disease in terms of destruction. So obviously, because here it's building bridges, so I'm more than happy to have a look at some of your samples, because it's complex measuring one thing which is fully controlled. You have TNF or not TNF, the function of IL-17 will be zero or massive, what I showed. But at the same time, if you have soluble TNF receptor, we have IL-25 that I've not discussed, another member of the family, then the balance could be, well, there's plenty of IL-17, plenty of inhibitors, the net effect is no effect, right? Exactly what you showed.
Can you comment on 17A versus 17B, whatever?
F.
If you look at the clinical trials, the anti-IL-17A antibody did as well as the anti-receptor antibody, but the anti-receptor
psoriasis.
Psoriasis.
Yeah, because.
But I think there were some suicidal ideation.
Right, yeah.
So
that point I want to discuss too, because I
can
did.
You comment whether it's sort of we need to block 17A necessarily, or would you consider blocking the whole?
Can we get one? Do we have time to get one of my slides so I can?
I would say I would,
no, you don't
yeah,
want.
just
Okay, no
keep it
slides.
short. We
Then.
have only
So
5 minutes left.
you have seen the slide before, so remember. The receptor, the array, that's the old story. So targeted by brodalumab. So now, in the human system, there is a two receptor situation. So when you block the array, you block with hope in mind, you block the inflammation related to IL-17A and F, and possibly A and F. At the same time, you lose because you block the IL-25, which is like the IL-1 array in the IL-1 family. So the net effect will be how much left in terms of bioactive IL-17. The IL-25, which is the bad kid from the family just doing the opposite, then you have the array on one side and the RB on the other side. So the receptor is different. Hartluck made that the array was selected more than 20 years ago as the receptor. So the next story came much later. So there is a molecular difference between targeting the ligand and targeting the receptor. The clinical consequences in terms of adverse events remain to be fully understood. But that might be an important issue.
So sort of related to how complicated all this is, I think what you were just saying, I think shines a light on how complicated biomarker discovery really is for these groups of diseases where we're talking about net effects and not necessarily knowing yet all the counter-regulators. And so I think we just have to keep that in mind when we're trying to figure out good ways to find biomarkers that a high level of something may be in certain patients, as you just said, counteracted by a high level of its inhibitor. And another, I think, complicating factor has to do with the overall background genetics. The IL-1RA knockout mice in a different background get coronary artery aneurysms. And so we have, in one setting, on one genetic background, you get an arthritis picture, and in another setting, on another background.
They get both. They get arthritis and they die. Yeah. So linking again the arthritis and the systemic vascular effect, right?
Yeah.
Something I may add, which is a political comment to some extent, in terms of biomarkers, if we want to move forward, there is a need really to have bridges. And the bridge which is missing is to have access to samples during clinical trials. So clinical trials should be organized in a better way, because if you have an idea years later, but the frozen sample was not frozen as should be, or the RNA is gone because the PAX gene was not used, then you are stuck. You keep being with ideas and no results. And it's very difficult, I must say, to have access to samples from these overfull freezers, specifically the placebo group, because we can all study our patients on drug, but it's difficult today when the drug works to say, well, you are on the placebo group and I just want to follow whether you are still sick at the end. So that's really the next step for this type of foundation, is really to sort of push and make sure the regulation is in place so that this work can be done. Because samples are collected, use 1%, and at the end we lose plenty of information for the next step, and at the same time we kill drugs by not doing that.
This is particularly important in rare disease. This is particularly important in rare disease.
Even worse in rare.
Even more important. Let's put it possible.
Yeah, but the principle.
I think the new EMA guidelines of JIA do request or do solicitate and encourage and recommend.
We'll modify the word.
If I may make a consideration of this issue, is that the biomarker, these samples remain property of the company, and this makes it even more difficult to get access to them later on, and they may just sit there. So we have to find a way, which I don't know what it is, to make sure that these samples are being used and are available.
Yeah.
cannot really request
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I think there is a lot of initiative there, and maybe we can speak about it more. This London Declaration that was signed asks everybody to really show effort in making these samples available. And I think the idea was that also industry will support that. So I don't know if enough effort has been done to get really industry on board, because at the place on spot they promised to support this. It's really completely not understandable why this situation that you mentioned.
Yeah, okay. I'm referring to one example in this country, which was brodalumab. There were really a few patients who committed suicide. So is this because of the drugs, the weather is bad, they drink too much, or whatever? So, and today we are sort of stuck. And I simplify by saying, well, I have ideas. I'm not the only one with ideas, obviously, but give me the samples. I will tell you or not if we have an explanation. So if not, there will be, that's the case today, a label saying that if you are sort of stupid to some extent, you will not get the drug. And maybe this has nothing to do or has something to do with the drug. So it's really reaching a political debate, just one example, which is ongoing today.
So our time is up, but it seems to me that what we're starting to talk about now might really be a valuable thing if we have some unspoken for time. This whole idea of the access to samples and how that can facilitate the biomarker discussion that keeps coming up. I think that would be an area where if we came up with any new ideas for or even something where we really identify what the stumbling blocks are. Where are they? I think that could be useful because when you talk.
Have 1 or 2 pockets of time. They have one in the afternoon and one tomorrow morning.
Yeah, so maybe we'll come back to this topic. Okay, thank you.
Remarkably, because this is really a novel development, and the Canadian and the Dutch health authorities have brought together a very large sum of money for conducting such a study. We have not got the money yet, but hopefully we will. And it is meant that we will collect biomarkers of a very large cohort of patients under any treatment you want. It's observational. We're just collecting samples, and thus we will collect samples from about 1,500 patients. And it is specifically meant to make collaborations with other groups under the rationale that you mentioned in this declaration. So very open, with open standard coordination procedures in order to facilitate.
But I think Pierre's comment that if we're sharing among practicing physicians, we're not likely to have any placebo samples, and that or many fewer. So that's another thing that I think we need to keep in mind. Is there where's the door? Can we open a door to some of the other sources of samples? Yes, isn't that part of what you were talking about?
What I can do, although it was sort of partial success or real failure, we run this type of meeting for the adult RA, big round table, so combining people like us, right, trying to understand and treat, industry, all the small and bigger companies and regulators from the EMA, and trying to, maybe we should change things. So as you know, changing a law or regulation takes ages, but I can send this PDF and you can have a look, because you just remove adult and it's copy and paste, obviously. Right?
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, everybody.